Good job, Michelle.
That's still got a minute. No, you got a couple of seconds. Whatever you got. That minute don't want to.
Appearance is everything.
You're too quick. You have to.
Then you need a better phone.
You gotta
Your-
walk
Your
slower.
personal phone's kind of old and out of date.
A little bit. I like the smaller phone.
Wait for it.
He's showing me the pictures today of the house. His house.
You have
is
the
so
second,
nice.
see, I don't have it.
I'm like, can't see that.
Oh, there we go. Yep, wind up.
Which one is it? A 5 or a 6?
5.
That's what I thought. I should go talk to him.
Good.
Navy man myself.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Mount Olive Township Council meeting and workshop for April 2nd, 2019. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence for all those men and women that serve and protect us. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey. Notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Labow.
Here.
Mr. Mania.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nacastro.
Here. First item up for discussion is the Old Flanders project update. And first, I just wanted to thank Andrew for a lot of the work you put into this quickly to come up with some solutions that we feel will at least help with the burdens of some of the people. But I'll let you
Sure, thank
go
you.
through it.
So obviously at the last council meeting, we had the public hearing and the residents were concerned about the upfront cost to close down the septic and to tie in. So you asked me to look into other alternatives to help finance that part of the project. So we did discuss with our various professionals, bond counsel, Fred's office, and there is within the statute a provision that does allow a municipality to take this project on, to finance it, and to do the work on private property. So if that's the direction that the town council wants to take for those homeowners that can't do the upfront cost themselves, there is a mechanism that would allow us to find a contractor, go out to bid, get an agreement with the homeowners to do a special, separate assessment on that portion of the project. We would do the work, and then we would start to bill them annually, as with the other assessment.
And that's over a 20-year period? Is that what?
It's
roughly
up to the
15,
council.
20 years, whatever it is?
The other special assessment is for 20 years. You could have it run concurrently. You could do it, over a shorter period of time. Obviously, the longer you stretch it out, then the longer it takes for the town to recoup the money. But anywhere from 5 to 20, will be okay to
Will be okay.
float the money.
Ms. Lebo?
Thank you, Mr. President. And of course, 20 years of payments would be lower as well, and they could pay off early if they wanted to.
I don't know. Once we have the agreement set in place, it'd probably just be structured with an annual type payment.
Well, if they sold the house, would they have to settle the debt at that time when it changes owners?
Sue?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Different towns do it differently. In some towns, they do require a payoff when a house is sold, but in other towns, they'll allow the buyer to basically absorb the payments, and that they would have to have a separate agreement to sort of take on the debt for the rest. So I guess the benefit to the seller is they get the benefit of it while they're in the house, but they're not paying for the whole closing of the septic.
Well, I'd have to say, I think it'd have to be either or, because it could be a case where a buyer refuses to take on the assessment, and
Right.
so we wouldn't restrict them to, would it be optional at the point of changing title?
I think it would, the township would just have to make a decision on that, on how they wanted to deal with that going
At the
forward.
time of the sale of a house or at the time of the agreement?
I think we'd probably have to address that early on, so people would know, residents would know what the situation is.
How was the Bud Lake sewer?
And I think the Bud Lake sewer, it was pretty much, it was settled when you transfer title. You paid it, the
That's not
seller,
good.
yeah.
But you had to pay your
Yeah.
own at that point?
It's,
Your own
I-
closures and all, right?
Yeah, I don't know of any, it'd be really, it would be nice if the buyers assumed the response, because they're getting the benefit the rest of the time. However, depending on the price that the house gets, it might be because it has a sewer, so, you know, there's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
And the assessments are
Reasoning.
gonna be different depending on the owner, because the closing
Right.
costs are gonna be different.
Exactly.
The closing costs meaning to close the sewer, not,
Right, the
Yeah,
closing.
that's right.
not resident, yeah.
The other question I had, Andrew, was, let's say, we talked about 2 weeks ago, if, say, 5 or 6, whatever, residents got together and hired the same contractor to close out, and they could possibly get a better pricing, whatever. Now, if we're going to offer, if they're going to use the financing through the town, you had said something to me about it has to be prevailing rate, so we can't, like, they can't get a price from a contractor and then use the town?
I mean, if they want, they could go out on their own and get a price from a contractor and compare that with what our cost is going to be. You know, ideally, if you do move forward with this, I'd send out a letter to the residents. I would see who wants to opt into this program. This way, when I develop the bid specs, I have a list of the properties, so the contractors know which properties, you know, to bid on. At that point, I'll have the individual prices per property. I would then take those numbers and go back to the homeowners and say, okay, this is the price. Here's your separate agreement for us to do the work. And then once all those agreements are executed, we would move forward with the project. So in the meantime, if they want to still do their own research and price it out to compare, they can do that.
And just so everybody understands, we have a different standard that we have to abide by than what the individual homeowner would have, correct? So I would just
Yeah,
make
when
sure
we go out
people
to bid,
understand.
anything over $15,444, the contractor has to pay their employer's prevailing wage.
Right.
There's certain insurance requirements and bonding requirements, so although you're getting the benefit of, you know, more,
20 years to pay.
20 years
Yeah,
to
20
pay,
years.
and that the contractor is, you know, has more properties, and you might have the cost come down. There are still other cost factors which might end up bringing the cost up, but yeah, but it's broken up over 20 years, so.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody, there's a bunch of little, you know, I mean, it's great. I mean,
Right.
it's wonderful to not have to have the upfront costs. It's fantastic. But just if you get a price from one contractor because he's doing 5 or 6, that's not the price that we would have to go by because we have to follow bidding laws and all that other stuff,
So your question really is not a question, it's a point that you're
It's a
trying to
point
make.
I'm trying to make, but I'm asking it as a
Right, you
question
either-
to make sure I have it correct in my
You either get
understanding.
your own contractor, however you decide to do it, whether you group with other people and try and get the best price or you pay, or you have to use the contractor to get the benefit of the financing, you have to use the contractor who wins the bid.
Mhm.
And we don't know the difference in the cost, obviously, because nobody bid it yet. so
Right.
Yeah, we
know.
don't, we have
May not
no
be much
idea.
more, it may not be at all. We don't really know.
But you don't have to decide right away. It
Right.
would be at the time, right?
Right, once we get the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, at this point, if, whatever the town does, we wouldn't do the closing of the septics until probably next
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah.
We do the first portion of the project to lay the main, do all the grinder pumps. Once I know where all the grinder pumps are on the property, that'll help the contractor know how far to run the service lines to. We'll be able to bond money in the next budget. And then in the springtime, we would go out and do the work. So there, you know, and so there is time for the homeowners to do their homework and compare.
It's great. I think options, it's fantastic options everybody has to kind of help the whole situation.
Yep. That was the point, to try and get something to help relieve the immediate burden of trying to come up with that 12 to 15 estimate thousand. Now they have an option over 20 years, which makes a big difference.
So the residents are going to need to work with the town. You know, obviously, the contractors are gonna need to go onto their private property, they're gonna need to, you know, inspect what's there, they might need to gain access to the house. So there is a bit more level of coordination there, but it's doable.
Anyone else have anything on this?
Can we open it to the public at this point, Joe, and see if anybody has?
We could, I guess, at this time, we could
Just-
open it to the public and ask if there's any, anyone from the public that wants to be heard on this right now, you can. You can go up and just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, everyone. Elizabeth Hoke, 75 Main Street.
Could you
Thank
spell your
so
last name, please?
H-O-C-H.
Thank you.
Just like it sounds.
Exactly, which is why I, don't practice as Elizabeth Hoke, because Bancroft is so much easier. Just one quick question to what you were saying about with the financing, and thank you so much for looking into this, and thank you everyone for considering how to make this doable for everybody. But you were just saying, and perhaps I misunderstood, that with this second piece, this second special assessment, that might not take place until next spring, the hookup. Just for my own clarification, if we were to pay for it out of pocket, could we do it sooner?
Yes.
Okay,
If you do it out of pocket, as soon as the grinder pump is in and the main is in, you could contact the plumber to do the connection.
but there's no way for let's call it the second special assessment to run concurrently with the,
No.
the original, no? Okay. I was so excited to get them so soon and then have it financed and, okay. So if you want to take advantage of the financing, it's going to be another year.
We need to get the pipes in the ground first before we can move to the second phase of hooking people up.
Yeah,
So once the pipes are in the ground, if you're getting your own contractor, you can hook in.
yeah,
There's not too much we can do until the pipes are in the ground because we won't know exactly
The
what work
specs.
needs to be done
Okay.
on the second phase of the project, which is the actual tie-ins.
okay,
They might be billed the same time of the year, but it'll probably be a
year lag,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So, well, thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else from the public right now wish to be heard on this subject?
John Petzinger, P-E-T-Z-I-N-G-E-R, 70 Main Street, Flanders. Again, thank you all for looking into it to try to ease the cost. One question that occurred to me, and I guess maybe it can't be answered till later on. I was looking at my property, and I guess contingent upon where they install the grinder pumps, which we don't know at this point.
We have a good idea of where they're going. The specs that are prepared for this part of the project, the grinder pumps have been located on the site plan, so we do have a general idea of where they're going
On
on each property.
on each property?
Yeah.
Okay, so my concern is, obviously I don't know where on my property they're gonna go, because I haven't received anything, but where my septic is now, it's on the other side of my driveway, which would require my driveway to be torn up if they use the same piping.
Mhm.
So would that second special assessment or special financing cover the cost of tearing up my driveway and then repaving it, putting it back to?
I would assume it would. I would assume that
But the grinder pump's not the service line's not going from the grinder pump to your septic. It's going from the grinder pump to your house.
Okay, so then in other words, they need to reconfigure the piping in my house, because right now the piping goes out to the side of the house if they.
That's all gonna be decommissioned.
Okay, so then the plumber would have to come in, re-pipe my house and run it out towards the front of my house.
Yes.
But in the event that there is restoration that needs to be done to either the driveway or landscaping, that will be included in that project, and that cost will be part of the assessment
And financed,
and financed.
if that's how you choose to go.
Okay. And now, my concern with that is, on that side, on the front of the house, is where my city water comes in.
Mhm.
How far does black water need to be from potable water?
That I don't know, but
Is that gonna run into an issue where you guys
15
put those
feet.
grinder pumps?
I think it's 15 feet.
between a public sewer line and a
I
public
think
water
where the
line?
water supply.
Are you
comes
on
in-
well or you're on city water?
No, they're
I'm
on
on
city
city
water.
water.
If it's a well, I know for sure it has to be 15 feet.
Yeah, I don't
I
know
don't-
that there is, these are excellent questions, which what I suggest you do is to contact Andrew. He will give you the engineer's telephone number. You can speak to the engineer directly and have all of these questions answered by the engineer. He can look at the plans. You can even schedule a meeting with him and look at where the grinder pump is potentially going to be located on your property and ask him all the questions and raise all of the concerns that you have so that if he hasn't identified one of your concerns, he can deal with it before we go too far down the line.
Just one thing too, Bob, it's usually with the well, if it's a well, but you have city water, but even still, they have a way, you just have to double encase it, the pipes, so it's, even though it has to be, it's 15 feet for the well in the septic or well in the sewer, but then the remedy for it, if you don't have 15 feet, is to just double encase it. I only know that because I went through that.
I don't think it's an issue if you're going to have both
Right.
sewer and city water.
Because,
Right.
yeah,
Sure.
they already kind of
Do you
take
know,
care of that
Tim?
already.
Do you have any idea?
From what I understand, it's around 5 feet if it's city water and city sewer.
Oh, so
Many
close.
times when they're doing a large project, they'll do city sewer first and put the water lines just above it, staggering it to the side. So septics are different, wells
Yeah.
are different, then you're getting into the 15-foot. But when it's a sealed line, city water and city sewer, it's much closer.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of the lines are sealed, so you don't
Yeah.
need the distance between. But what I suggest, again, your questions are very personal to your property, and I certainly understand the concerns. But really, to get the answers that you need to speak to the engineer and actually take a look at the plans that we have currently and raise these issues with him so that he can answer them. And then if you don't get answers you like, come back and say, spoke to the engineer, and these are my concerns, how are we going to deal with it?
Have the plans been, so the plans have not been sent to each resident that it's affecting?
No, and they won't be sent. The plans for the grinder pumps and the mains are done. Those are the plans that are gonna be used to go out to bid to find the contractors for that work. If you want, you can come into my office tomorrow. I have the plans. We can look at your property and see where the grinder pump is scheduled to go, and then we'll see how that correlates with everything else that you have on your property.
All right, Roger that, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time wish to be heard?
Hello, my name is Dale Webb, 22 Park Place, and was here for last meeting, and I do appreciate all the work that, and 2 weeks, it seems like you came up with a good, I think, a good answer in a short period of time, so thank you for that, Andrew. I did make a couple of phone calls, though, first. I think at last meeting I had spoke about the possibility of a resident being able to close his own septic system. And I did some calling around, and at first I started with Mount Olive Township, and I did, 'cause the board said, call the health department, so I called the health department. And I was told that I was not allowed to close up my own septic system. But then I did a little bit more research, and I called the state, and the state actually said that I was, but it depends on the county. So I called the county, and the county said, yes, you are allowed to close up your own septic. It depends on, though, because Mount Olive has its own health department, it depends on the township. So I called the township again, and I spoke with, she only gave me her first name, but her name was Susan. She said she was an inspector, and she did not know my answer. So she did a little research, and she called me back about a few hours later and just told me to sit tight. Do we know the
I
answer to
spoke-
that question?
The deputy director called me before I left the office today. He said that you are allowed to close it down yourself as long as you follow DEP and the health guidelines, so. a
Okay,
resident-
so that's another cost-effective way.
You could get your own fill, however you're supposed to fill it, and you
Right,
can do
because
it.
I know the kind of septic system I have, it's a tank with a leach tank, so I have just basically 2 tanks in the ground. I don't have a leach field, I don't have anything like that to close up, so it's basically gonna be bust out the bottom, fill it full of stuff, and you're done. It's in a nutshell, I'm not saying it's that easy, but, I I just hope that this project does go through, and I would just like to say one more little thing, maybe more to the public than to the board, because I hope you do pass it. But as I said last time, my father bought the house in 1929, and he died when I was 14 years old. And if you asked me when I was 14 years old, if 45 years later I would still be a Mount Olive taxpayer living in the same house, I probably would have really not known the answer. But my point is that you never know what the future's going to bring. A lot of families that were here last time, it's not everybody because I know things have been tied, but there are a lot of multi-generational families that live in Old Flanders. So there's a lot of families that, even though our parents are gone, we still live in the same houses. So for the new people here, if you've just bought your house in the last few years, you know, kind of maybe think about that maybe your children might be there. You don't really know. If you were to ask my father if somebody still would have been living in a house that he bought 90 years ago, he probably would have said no. But there's more that, I'm not the only story like that in Flanders. You know, there's other multi-generation households there. So I think it's a good improvement, and I hope you guys pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roman?
Andrew, is there any updated ordinance that would be required were a homeowner to close his own septic? Just something to codify and make it a whole lot easier, instead of that way somebody in the future doesn't have to go through what he just went through? Or is this just like an administrative regulatory item?
Yeah, I don't think that was something that you would need to codify.
It'd also be a Board of Health issue, not a council issue in the first instance.
I'll double check.
But we should have the guidelines available to anyone who's looking as to what is actually required.
Right.
As part of this project, so that if next time someone calls, they can just be given the information at hand. This is what's actually required to close your own tank if you so choose.
Okay, and maybe just to clarify that would be call the Board of Health. You would make those guidelines of, right?
If the Board of Health is the entity which oversees the health department. Obviously, the governing body has responsibility for everything that happens in town.
Right.
But to the extent that there were guidelines which were drafted and then needed to be codified into an ordinance, which would be a town law, they would come from the Board of Health. I don't think we need it. I think
Right,
it's
right.
overkill.
Right. But to your point, I guess for anybody else who's interested, where would they call?
Well,
To get what you
I
just
think
proposed?
that we will have them available both in the health department, and in the mayor's office through the business administrator, so that in either location, there'll be a cheat sheet that says, if you so choose to
To do
close
X,
your
Y, and
own
Z.
septic system, these are the required steps to do so. So it talks about either the fill that's needed, the
Right.
permitting that's needed, whatever is required. I don't know what's required.
Right.
So,
Okay.
But I can tell you, to the point that you're making, I do know that there are a lot of, third and fourth generation families down in Old Flanders, and I certainly have known, or at least been aware of your family for years and years and years. I also practice real estate law, and I can tell you that anytime I get a deal with the septic system, it's a nightmare. Even if it's a newer septic system, it's a nightmare. And the cost associated to the homeowner of fixing it so that they can sell their house, whether it's a baffle, whether it's a replacement of the entire leach field, whether it's a replacement of the septic system itself, is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And I would say it's in 80% of the deals that I have that have septic, the septic invariably fails. You have water infiltration. The fact that you're getting the opportunity, and I understand the costs that are involved to get sewers, is huge. Many people may not realize that at this point, but they will once they get it. It's huge.
No, and I understand that, and just you talked about, but for instance, my property line is here and the septic tank is there. I don't have the particular property that I own.
Yeah.
It's not a huge property, so
Right.
there's not a lot of even room to work, which is a huge issue.
And the standards keep changing.
Correct.
Matt, why don't you come up for a second? Come up here. It's Matt Johnston, who,
Matthew Johnston, 19 Park Place.
so Matt,
Good evening.
you also do real estate as well.
That's all I do.
Is what I'm saying wrong about deals that have septic systems? It's invariably a nightmare, no matter how old the septic system is.
It is, and it's costly. And depending whether you're on Main Street or Park Place, it's very difficult to put systems more on Park Place right now because of the wetlands issues, and there's some setback issues. But Main Street is very limited on space also. Getting the engineering for these type of systems, if you're lucky, it's a mound system. If you're unlucky, it's a very expensive system that gets pumped, and it's quite costly, upwards of $50,000+ lately in some of these
It's
areas.
unbelievable.
Yep.
Every time I get a deal that's got a septic system, I know it's gonna come back, and that's gonna be one of the home inspection issues, is that something's wrong with the septic. And it's thousands of dollars.
Well, and one of the misnomers, and for some of the public to understand too, is you could have a newer septic system, one that's only 10 years old, and you never know. It's a, dare I say, a crapshoot, without being too rude. But you really literally never know whether a system's going to function or not function. It has a lot to do, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but I've had enough situations come up in my practice where you have unusual situations. Water can log up from the bottom and it can saturate a field. You can have broken pipes underneath there that are going to cause it to be diverting into the wrong areas. Weird things happen with these systems. And the new systems now, the DEP keeps changing and changing all of the rules related to what you can do and can't do depending on where you are with regard to these systems. And that's why last week, well, 2 weeks ago, I was up here trying to make sure that my opinion was heard, which is that at least in the town portion of Park Place and Main Street, it's virtually impossible unless you have significant amount of land to be able to even install a system that fails. And mine is on the edge, and I know that, and I appreciate the fact that the town's going out of its way to try and make this work. And I do definitely understand the cost considerations, but you know, if you own a house now and something happens, regardless of whether you're going to sell it or not, and you have a septic fail and it starts backing up, forget $12,000, $15,000. You're now talking about a tremendously larger amount of money to just be able to utilize your house. And so I certainly still support the position of the town by trying to give us these the access to these new septic systems.
Yeah, I think it's a
sewer
huge,
systems.
I think it's a huge opportunity for the residents, I really do.
Thank you.
You have to come up.
You have to go up if you want to.
Just wanted to put Matt on the spot for
Oh,
something.
great.
Elizabeth Hoke again, 75 Main. Now that Matt's here, and maybe he and Rob could address Colleen's question to the effect of what are they seeing with special assessments being part of the sale of a property? Are you seeing that the sellers are being required to satisfy the assessment in full in order to transfer title, or are you seeing buyers taking on the assessment and paying it going forward?
So you want me to sell my services now, because that's what you usually want to have a real estate attorney for, because the average.
I got 2 words for you. Lou Farina.
That's a great client. The reality is, if in most sales contracts in New Jersey at least, the standard is if there's an added assessment that is existing on your property, the buyer pays it off. Right, I'm sorry, the seller pays it off. But if you have an attorney, and you have an attorney that is aggressive, most of the transactions that I work with, we attempt to get the buyer to take it on, because they're the ones that are going to get the benefit of the assessed conditions. So in this particular case, yeah, you have a new septic, or excuse me, sewer that's been implemented, and you have an assessment that's been added on. The tradition has always been that the seller eats it. But that does not mean that if you have a good attorney that knows what they're doing and will, you know, make sure that part of the deal is that the new folks are going to just assign on the remainder of the payments that are due. That is something I do very commonly. The seller needs to make this decision before they sell a house, and that's something that I talk about with my clients when I'm representing sellers. Do you have added assessments? Okay, how do you want to deal with that? Do you want to Just leave it be as the standard and absorb it, pay it from your pocket, or you have the absolute ability to negotiate that out. And most attorneys will accept that if it's a valid assessment. Now, if it's something that's been that's been done for quite a long time, and the assessments are really having a benefit for the existing owner, in my experience, it's harder to sell taking over that payment plan, but it's negotiable. And frankly, I'm glad that Elizabeth brought it up, because those of you that may end up deciding to sell your house for whatever reason down the road, once this goes into play, if it's approved, make sure you talk with your attorney about it. You can have this negotiated either before you list the home, during the listing, or after the listing. Even if you forget to do it then, you can utilize attorney services to make sure that you have this added cost not be deducted from your proceeds when you sell it. It's absolutely negotiable, and we do it a lot.
Business cards with you, Matt?
I would never do that at a town meeting
Do I
like
get
this.
2 ICL credit points for?
We give discounts for
Matt,
referrals.
Matt, my question earlier, which Elizabeth alluded to, was I wanted to know, and we're going to check it out, if you have to does it have to be one way or the other at the inception of the lien, the agreement, the special assessment, or can you decide when you pass title? So have you seen where towns require it one way or another?
Towns do not get involved in who pays it as long as it gets paid,
As long
because
as
it's
it gets
attached
paid.
to the
Okay.
property. Therefore, it's really the standard realtor contracts. If you're using a realtor, if you read the contract, all their standard contracts say if the assessment's been levied or if it's been announced and confirmed, it generally is taken on by the seller at the time of sale, but that is negotiable, and I've done it many times under the circumstances.
So I guess that's what we'll have to look into, that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on it, get all of our options on the table now so we know what we're doing.
Thanks, Matt.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else?
Good evening, my name is Don Heinrich. I'm a pastor at Calvary Bible Chapel, which is on 76 Main Street, and it's Heinrich, if you need the spelling. One thing that came up in the last discussion was about the possibility of adding sewer or the gas lines at the same time. Is there any possibility of that?
I did meet with New Jersey Gas last week because they're doing some other projects in town. It doesn't look like they'll be able to coordinate and get in there before the town lane puts down the main. So that might be, that'll be after the fact.
Will they have to wait 5 years, Andrew, to do it, to
We
break
could-
into the
If we
road?
repave them, then we can hold them to that. But sometimes they put their lines behind the curb line, so.
So we don't know. Okay.
Mr. Roman? You have something?
Did they allude as to when they were planning on doing it?
No, but I could follow up and get a better time frame.
Because would it make sense that if they, let's say their timeline is 3 months later, would it make sense to hold off until?
Well, we could hold off on paving.
Paving wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hold off on the paving.
Sure you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd coordinate that together.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
So just one more thing to clarify,
Yep,
there's
go
two
ahead.
ordinances on the agenda, one for first and one for second. I mistakenly forgot to include a vacant property in the project, and that homeowner would like to be included on the special assessment. So we need to introduce or adopt the ordinance as is, and then we're going to amend it to include that property, and then it'll be finalized again at the next meeting. And that property owner will be noticed just on his own. That's what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. That's all I got. Oh, it's this one here, never mind.
And Andrew, I applaud you for the work that you did in just short
Yes.
order.
Thank you. Well, I had a lot of good staff that helped, so.
Yeah, and thank you, because
And good leadership as well.
Okay, we have 28 resolutions. Does anyone have any questions or anything on the resolutions? We have 2 ordinances, one for first reading and one for second reading. Does anybody have any questions or concerns on those? Seeing none, do we have any old business? Seeing none, do we have any new business? Seeing none, does anyone from the public wish to be heard at this time? Seeing none, close to the public. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I will open the hearing to the Mount Olive Township Council meeting for April 2nd, 2019. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Labow.
Here.
Mr. Mania.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nacastro.
Here. Mr. Amianda, would you approve the minutes from the previous meeting, March 29, 2019, workshop and public meeting, please?
Yes, Mr. President, I make a motion for approval of minutes of previous meetings, March 19, 2019, work session and public meeting.
Second.
Anyone from the public? None? Anyone from council? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Labow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Abstain.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes, we have 10 pieces of correspondence. Does anyone have any questions on those? Seeing none, I open the hearing to the public on ordinance number 9-2019, the bond ordinance providing for sewer improvements to Old Flanders area of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey, for the sewer utility appropriating $1 million, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1 million in bonds or notes of the township to finance in part costs thereof and directing a special assessment of the cost thereof. Mr. Ferrante.
Chair, I move for adoption and final passage ordinance number 9-2019.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard at this time? Seeing none, closed to the public. Does anyone from council have anything else to say on this? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Labow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes. Ordinance number 9-2019 is passed on second reading, and I hereby direct the clerk to forward a copy of the same to the mayor and publish the notice of adoption as required by law. We have, next item on the agenda is for first reading, ordinance number 10-2019, ordinance amending section 3A of bond ordinance number 9-2019 of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey, finally adopted April 2nd, 2019, in order to amend the description of the project. Ms. Labow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 10-2019 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on April 16, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Labow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes. Mr. Mania, would you please move the consent resolutions 1 through 28?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for approval of the consent resolutions 1 through 28.
Second.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard on any? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council? Roll call, please. Did anybody want any move to non-consent? I apologize.
No.
Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Labow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes. Mr. Stewart, would you please move the bill list?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption and passage the bill list. Second.
Anyone from the public on the bill list? Any questions? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Labow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Abstain on check 84455, and yes to all others. Administrative reports.
I'll be brief. Many of you saw, if you followed social media, that there was some concern about the removal of the playground equipment at Blue Nelson Park. Our insurance company had required us to take down the equipment because it was no longer up to code. There was a significant number of residents who voiced their opinion about the park, and through hard work done by both Tim, Sherry, and the administration, we were able to identify unencumbered funds from a prior bond ordinance to be able to start that project, replacing the swing the playground equipment this year rather than to have to wait until next year and revisit the issue. So I know that the residents were extremely happy with that. We also may be able to use certain of the equipment that we're removing from Flanders Park, like the swings, over at Lou Nelson Park. We're still looking at that. Secondly, if you haven't been up to Turkey Brook, they're well along in terms of the baseball field projects, the drainage, the turf. And we're hopeful that that will be open either opening day or opening day will be moved back by a week. But we're moving as quickly as we can to get that done and working in conjunction with the Baseball Softball Association. And this Friday at the Bud Lake Firehouse, free rabies clinic.
What is it?
Rabies.
Rabies.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
One more thing to add, towards the end of this month, we're getting a jump start on some of the paving, so we've identified about 6 or 7 roads that will be milling and paving by the end of April.
Beyond that, I noticed today that we're starting to get more hot patch. So I saw that a number of the roads actually had the potholes had been repaired more significantly than we can do during the winter time with cold patch. And not only us, but I saw that the county was out as well, and I saw the state out as well this morning on Route 46.
And with the good weather coming, it should be a lot more.
It's
Mr. Rhodes?
as soon as the plants open and we can get the hot patch.
Andrew, is it possible that every week before you're going to be doing any paving, if you could alert us as to the streets that will be hitting?
Ms. Labo?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank the administration and all of the employees who helped to get Lou Nelson Park back up and running. And I have to say, Saturday, I was over in that area, and I was going around just to, check out the park again. And I saw 4 kids, teenagers, walking down Central Road with basketballs to go play basketball over there. So that, it is a park that is used quite frequently over the years. I used to go there many, many years ago when my kids were little. So it's wonderful that we will have that park. Also, the other thing that's nice about that park is it's in the shade. So if you're going to like Turkey Brook Park, which is fantastic, but when it gets the sunny and hot, the kids can't really go on some of the equipment. It's just too hot to touch. So this is a nice shaded family area, so it's awesome. And then the other thing I wanted to say, Andrew, I thought you were going to maybe bring it up. Didn't we get approved for the $333,000 for International Drive?
The state just announced the DOT Transportation Trust Fund grant, so we're getting $330,000. At the next meeting, you'll see a contract to award to the engineer, and there's a little coordination because there's a couple warehouses that are going up there, so we want to make sure that we don't pave it and then they
Rip it up.
to tie into the utilities, so we'll make sure that's all.
It's very nice.
Yeah, that was excellent. I was like, and as goes to Robert, you were talking about it. One of our residents, he was asking about International Drive, and now we know we got the money for it. Yay!
One other thing about Lou Nelson, Tim reached out to JCP now. There's a couple poles there that could use some utility lights, so we're going to try to lighten up the
nice.
area as well.
Very
Very
nice.
nice.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated.
Anything else for administrative? Thank you. Any old business? Seeing none, any new business?
Yes.
Seeing none, any legal matters?
I just wanted to add thanks to Andrew, the administration and council, for really working hard in a very short period of time to address the public's concerns with these bond ordinances and with this project. And it's a really good example of why the ordinance process is the way it is and why it's important for the public to come out and express their opinions. Because obviously folks who were concerned about the upfront costs came out, told council that. Council really considered that, tabled the ordinance, and in a really short period of time, we're able to come up with a really creative solution where everyone can hopefully get the benefit and, help ease the burden a little bit. So thank you for working with our office, bond council, and really getting this done.
Thank you. Council reports. Mr. Amianda, anything from Board of Ed or seniors?
Yes, Mr. President. Board of Education report. Board of Education held its regular meeting on Monday, March 25th, 2019 at Administration Building, 6:30 p.m. Board of Education approved a reorganization plan and the new job descriptions effective May 1, 2019. Ms. Elizabeth Quimet, Board President, read Board of Education mission statement that read as follows. The Mount Olive Township School District, a guiding and unifying partner in dynamic community, educates, challenges, and inspires all learners within a safe, nurturing environment to discover and develop their unique abilities, literate, ethical, and contributing citizens of the world. Further, the Board of Education discussed information and committee reports and actions and took actions on personnel, curriculum and instruction, business, policy, and administrative action items. The board also approved March 2019 HIP harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents as required by law. Now, Senior Citizens Report. On Wednesday, March 2019 at 11 a.m., Ms. Carol Stoltz, Director, Caregiver, Morris County Human Resource Administration Office of Aging, Disabilities, and Community Programming, visited the Mount Olive senior citizens. Seniors appreciated the speaker's visit. Further, Mount Olive Seniors Club held its business meeting today on April 2nd, 2019 at 11:30 a.m. There were two speakers, Sergeant Mays from Mount Olive Police Department and Detective Gerardo from Morris County Sheriff's Canine Training Unit. Mount Olive Police Department provided box lunches for all. And that is the end of
Thank you, Mr. Amianda. Environmental Laker Library, Mr. Ferrante.
Just an announcement from the Environmental Commission. They'll be hosting their well testing event on Saturday, May 18th.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, anything on economic development or community action panel?
Yeah, on the economic development, this town was one of two municipalities recognized by the Morris County EDC for the work that they do in the business community. I had the honor of receiving that award for the township, and our next meeting is next Wednesday. And then for Community Action Panel, May 21st, for a half day at the Bud Lake Firehouse, we'll be having a open to the public complimentary opioid crisis workshop with breakout tables, including Hope One will be there so it'll be a expert panel for about 30 minutes and private breakout sessions for anybody that needs and would like more information.
Thank you, and thank you for accepting that award on the town's behalf. Mrs. Labo, anything on Open Space, Board of Health, or Stigma?
No, we don't have the meetings till next week.
Thank you. Mr. Maney, anything on legislative or planning?
Planning was one application, was before the board, and that was a use variance of which I cannot vote on, so I wasn't able to attend.
Thank you. Mr. Roman, anything on Rec or Pride?
Rec meets tomorrow. Pride met last week. We started to develop a plan for a veterans banner program in order to honor Mount Olive War veterans. Pride will be coordinating with the Mount Olive Historical Society, and hopefully we can get that program up as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wish to be heard at this time? Seeing none, close to the public. Any council comments? Mr. Amianda?
Well, I just want to remind everybody that over 600 people made on a Saturday with the grieving Muslim community for the people killed in the massacre attack in New Zealand, where 50 people were killed in that massacre.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrante?
Nothing today.
Ms. Labow?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody, April is Autism Awareness Month. And today, if everybody, we're supposed to wear blue. And our police department, I picked mine up yesterday, we have little keychains, $10 for autism awareness, and they have patches also. So when you're leaving tonight, if you have some money on you, you can stop by the dispatch and get your own patch or keychain or both.
Thank you.
And
Mr.
one last thing, I'm going to
sorry.
thank the administration and Andrew specifically for all the great work you guys are doing, everybody. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Also, it's really wonderful to, I'm getting, my memory sometimes fails me, and I stopped in Andrew's office yesterday. I'm like, yeah, I knew I wanted to ask you a question about something. He starts going through the list of stuff, and I got all my questions answered, and I have to worry about calling him later because I forgot what I wanted to ask him. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mania?
Yes, I want to applaud the administration's work on the sewer project. Great job, thank you. Also, I attended an Eagle Scout ceremony on Sunday for Shane Robert Patrick. What an impressive ceremony. He even got a letter from President Trump. His merit badges, he has 28 merit badges. Unbelievable what they go through to become an Eagle Scout. I was so impressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
None tonight.
Mr. Roman?
I was only able to make it up to Pigeon Scout. I got first place as far as I got. I have nothing else, thank you.
I have nothing. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all, and thank you everyone for coming this evening.
Yeah, you should make sure your clock is set ahead, because daylight savings time.
Is it in France?
Yeah. How are you?